Hi everyone, Peter here. Thanks for joining me for another round of stories on this Saturday morning. This is Thailand Bound. If you haven't been here before, I talk about all things Thailand. Okay, a very special Saturday today because obviously tomorrow is Christmas. So sincerely from me, wherever you are around the world, I'd like to wish you all the best. I hope you have a very happy Christmas, whatever you're doing. And New Year is just around the corner actually. So let's crack straight on with these stories, straight in with the first one.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I first visited Thailand in March 2015 with a friend who had visited Thailand 2 or 3 times over the years prior. We decided we would travel the country spending 2 or 3 days in every place that we ended up. We started our holiday in Pattaya and ended in Phuket, taking in Koh Samui, Koh Nang and Phi Phi Island. Our first night in Pattaya we spent taking in the bars on Soi Buakhao, wherever I got talking to a lady named Om. My friend had already told me about how the bars in places like Pattaya worked, so I knew what to expect. As I was talking to Om, she told me how she'd worked in a coffee shop through the day and only started working in the bar a couple of weeks beforehand due to her younger sister working in the bar. I just assumed this was the usual story, as my friend had told me of the stories the girls come out with. As the night went on, me and Om decided on a few more drinks back at my hotel. Once she had finished her shift, as she had a day off from the coffee shop the next day. I don't think I need to explain what happened next. The following morning, Om left. She asked if we could exchange numbers, so we did so, and Om went on her way. I joined my friend once again for the rest of our holiday, thinking that would be the last I would see of Om. During our holiday, I well and truly caught the Thailand bug, booking flights as soon as we got back that November. During our second holiday, we decided to spend 5 nights in Pattaya, where the first morning we decided to stop for a drink whilst out exploring. We stopped in this little coffee shop on the beach road, where to my surprise, Om was serving the coffee. She asked me why I had not stayed in contact with her and went on to tell me she no longer worked at the bar, as she and her sister had gone back to live with the family in their second village near Chonburi. Me and Om decided to go out that night and catch up. This time I did stay in contact with Om, as I believe she was being genuine, not telling me the usual bar girl stories. I then spent the next couple of weeks visiting Om and keeping in regular contact when back in England. Om never asked me for a penny during these 2 years. Towards the end of 2017, Om decided she wanted to come to visit me in England, but she told me she didn't have the money for the flight, so I decided I would pay for Om's flight. We spent every minute of the day and night together. Fast forward to 2022, me and Om have a lovely little 2-year-old boy and are happily married. I have a fantastic set of in-laws in Thailand, and me and Om run a pub in my hometown where we have a very good reputation for food, especially our Thai nights, where Om absolutely smashes it with her cooking. I wanted to share this story as it ends in a happy way, as opposed to some of the horror stories you get sent into your YouTube channel, and I just wanted to show people that it's not all doom and gloom and you can find real happiness when you least expect to. So quite a nice story there. So yeah, miracles do happen. There are guys who meet girls in bars. They all tell the same story, but occasionally you do find a diamond in the rough. So good luck to the pair of them. And while we're on this kind of subject of stories that end well, just a quick reminder, guys, if you're sitting on a story, please send it in to me. I'm running a little bit low. It doesn't have to be a doom and gloom or a crash and burn story. It can be a happy ending like this. When anything interesting, people just like to hear relationship stories. So if you've got one, please send it in, okay? Right, let's jump into story number 2. In 1998, when the dollar used to be around 47 baht and you could get more by using traveller's checks, I was in Thailand on holiday. On one particular day, I was sitting in Soi Arab at the back of Soi 3 when a Thai guy in a suit came and sat down next to me and started a random conversation. It turned out that this guy was actually a travel agent and was based in Soi Arab. He asked where I was staying, and at that I was staying in the Hotel Miami on Sukhumvit Road, where you could get a double room for 350 baht a night. He asked me if I would like to join him on a tour and told me that I wouldn't have to pay a penny as he wanted to be friends. So I agreed to be picked up the following morning. As it happens, the tour was great and there were no scams involved, but unfortunately we had to head back to Bahrain the following day. Several weeks later, the tour guide contacted me and said he would love to come and visit us in Bahrain. At the time, we were thrilled to bits to invite him to our country. We arranged a sponsorship visa for him as our country was not very tourist friendly at that time. We told him that we could offer him accommodation and find him work if he was interested. Eventually, he turned up and told us he was only staying for a week's holiday to see what it was like, which was fine by us. We are professional fishermen and we had to go out to sea for 2 days to collect our catch. The laws are very strict here in Bahrain and it's not permitted to take somebody out to sea if they don't have a license. When we arrived, we showed him to the accommodation we had arranged for him and made sure the kitchen was fully stocked with food, and we also gave him a brief tour of the surrounding area as we wouldn't be back for a couple of days. Once out at sea, we became overcome with guilt that we had invited a guest to our country and left him alone, so we decided to cut our trip short and come back into shore after just 1 day. When we arrived at the accommodation we had arranged for him, we were shocked to see that everything was exactly the same as when we had left it. It was totally undisturbed, and our guest, whose name was actually Joe from Thailand, was nowhere to be found. Joe's belongings were in the room, his clothes, his bags, his passport, but as said, he was nowhere to be found. On the second day, Joe appeared out of nowhere, but we were totally shocked to see him dressed in Arab clothes, but thought to ourselves, thank God he'd come back, as we were very close to alerting the authority of his disappearance. As it turned out, it all became clearer and made sense when he heard his story. We had told him that we wouldn't be back for 2 days, so he decided to explore the area by himself. Some of our neighbours took it on themselves to befriend him and look after him in our absence. They had also lent him the clothes and invited him to eat authentic Arabic food in their homes. Joe, being a tour guide and having the Lonely Planet book with him, took it upon himself to discover parts of the island that the locals weren't really interested in or had forgotten. He also took lots of photographs and had them developed in a 1-hour development shop. When he showed them to us, it was quite amusing as it reminded me of field trips we had taken as school children. Joe was a natural extrovert and people in our village took to him immediately. They invited him for dinner and showed him around. In fact, Joe was quite a celebrity at the time. Like all Thai people, he always had a smile on his face. Sadly, we lost contact with Joe, who became a great friend. We would love to know what happened to him. The last time we heard from him was around 2000. He used to go by the email address joe38@hotmail.com. Anyway, that's my short story about Joe from Thailand. I don't know if your viewers will find it interesting or not. You might not even use it, but I'll send it in anyway, and if you do read it, thanks very much. So quite a nice little story there. I spent about 3 years in the Middle East. I was in Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and I found when I was there, the Arabic people who I had contact with were very, very friendly, very accommodating. And, you know, if I said to them, oh, you've got a really nice pen there, they'd offer it to me, or I like your lighter, they'd say, well, it's yours. You know, and if you haven't been to the Middle East, there's a lot of sort of cliche thoughts on how the Middle East is, but there's some very, very friendly people there, mostly actually, and I've got some fond memories of there, and it just proves this story from these guys in Bahrain. And if you don't know where Soy Arab is, it's adjacent to Soy 3 at the back of the Grace Hotel. There's some great authentic Arabic food, breads. You get some Indian food as well. I eat there very often actually, and there's also a great exchange booth there at the back. It was featured in my last live stream when I walked down there. All right, maybe too much information. Let's get on with the next story. Okay, now I've got to make a confession to you right here, guys. I might have actually made a mistake on these next stories because as I reran them, I'd rehearsed them a little bit. I thought these seem familiar, and I've got a feeling I might have read these out a year ago. So if I have, apologies, and you're going to have to skip until next week when we have some fresh stories. If you haven't heard them, which I'm hoping you haven't, then you can enjoy these. Either way, I'm going to get on and just read them anyway. Okay, so this is the third of 4 stories today. And I've also got a little bit of a warning for you guys who come out here, who are actually coming out here to date, because something happened recently, which I witnessed with a friend just the other day. And I'm going to tell you that little story, which has nothing to do with these stories. Very, very interesting. You'll have to wait to the end for that one. Okay, story number 3. This story took place in the new year between 2015 and 2016. I was 26 and had been living in Thailand for 2 years. My best friend from back home in the UK, Pete, was visiting. Pete had already been to Thailand once and loved it. He arrived early in the morning on Christmas Eve and we met up at the Nana Hotel. We got rooms, ditched the bags and jumped straight into the pool where we chilled and caught up. At one point, a freelancer approached us at the poolside showing some very X-rated videos with men, including one video where she had golf balls popping out of a place where golf balls shouldn't be popping out of. She asked if either of us want to go with her, and while it was an interesting offer, ultimately we declined. We still laugh about this story today. Later, we got burgers, then we hit the bars. We started at Hanaran's, the Irish pub on Soi 4, before going into Hillary's opposite the Nana Hotel. Later, we end up in Nanaplaza in a go-go bar called London Calling, with lots of girls walking around while not wearing very much. One takes my fancy. She's a gorgeous little lady with a pretty face, red bikini and blonde highlights. She approaches me, introducing herself as Dang from Udon Thani. Pete is soon joined by another of the dancers. I ended up bar finding her, giving her a head nod to Pete and his girl as we go. I get Dang back to my room where we enjoyed each other's company. Woke up Christmas Day and Dang leaves. We exchanged line IDs with the vague intention of seeing each other again before saying goodbye. Me and Pete just spent the day lazing by the pool and ended up in Hillary Bar again that night. There we saw two attractive girls across the room who smile at us. One is in a black dress with jet black hair, while the other girl is petite in a red dress with bleached blonde hair. We went over to chat to them. They were teachers from the Philippines. No wonder their English was so good. Pete hits it off with a girl in the black dress named Veronica, while I get close with the red dress girl named Cindy. Later, we end up back in my room where the drinks continue. Veronica then takes Pete and they go back to his room next door, and I'm left alone with Cindy, and I'm sure you don't need me to explain the rest. Merry Christmas from Bangkok. I love Filipino girls. The next morning at breakfast, Pete looks tense, and when outside of the earshot of the girls, he tells me that the Veronica is annoying him and has already become very clingy. The girls tell us they want to hang out with us, but we pretend we are leaving town that day. I like Cindy, so become friends with her on Facebook, but Pete can't get away from Veronica. I vaguely plan to see Cindy sometime and we say our goodbyes. We were soon to travel to the New Year's Eve beach party in Koh Phangan. There were no flights at the time, so we ended up taking the slow train, which turned out to be a great choice, as you'll learn later. On the day it was time to travel, we met my two friends from Pattaya, Rob and Phil, at the main train station in Bangkok. Rob was an Aussie guy, a year younger than me and probably my best friend in Thailand. The other guy, Phil, was an American in his 30s. He loved the ladies and was your typical Pattaya Farang. I was glad to see that Pete and the two guys hit it off immediately and we became quite the squad. It was a local train with wooden seats, no air conditioning and a funky smell. We departed Bangkok and seemed to travel very slowly. Soon after leaving Bangkok, we hear the chatter of several Europeans coming into our carriage. With plenty of space nearby, we invite them to join us, and they do. There's 4 guys and 2 girls, looking to be in their mid-20s. They are Italian and German and have just been studying in Bangkok and are heading to the full moon party, then Phuket, before they go back to their countries. My attention was immediately caught by one of the girls. Being in Asia for so long, I haven't dated a Western girl for a long time, but this girl was stunning. She had dark hair, striking blue eyes, and a gorgeous tan that only comes from several months in Southeast Asia. We start talking and she introduces herself as Isabel, a 23-year-old from northern Italy. She speaks fluent English with a British accent as she studied in Brighton a couple of years prior. She was very likeable and I quickly developed a crush on her. We talked for the entire 13 hours through the night as everyone else slept, right till our arrival in Surat Thani early the next morning. We then travelled together by boat to Koh Samui. Upon arrival, we separated as me and the guys had a night in Koh Samui while the Europeans were heading directly to Koh Phangan. After we parted ways, it immediately hit me that I had forgotten to get Isabel's contact number. No phone number or social media. Gutted. I like this girl. We stayed in a grubby cheap guest house in Chawang Beach and chilled on the beach that day. I wasn't in the mood to go out that night. The tiredness from the train journey caught up to me, so I stayed in as the guys went out. The next morning we caught the boat across to Koh Phangan. Though poor travel planning, every single motorbike on the island had already been rented. We walked the streets in frustration till we found someone rented out a Toyota Hilux pickup truck. We drove the truck through jungle tracks to our beach bungalows, got there, ditched our bags and dived headfirst into the idyllic blue sea. If there was a paradise, it must be here. We bought a plastic frisbee and a kid's football and just chilled out on the beach for that day. That night we head over to the head rim where the full moon party was. I've never seen anything like it before. It was massive, stretching from one corner of the beach to the other, with huge crowds and lights as far as the eyes could see. The noise was tremendous and hundreds of speakers blasted every kind of music on top of each other. We bought mysterious concoctions of alcohol, Coke, Red Bull, sold in little children's plastic buckets. Times were good and a couple of hours passed in a blur. Suddenly, I was tapped on the shoulder from behind and heard a familiar voice say my name. I turned around and was very surprised. There was Isabel, the Italian girl from the train, along with a German girl she was with before. Her other friends were nowhere to be seen. We hugged and exclaimed shock and surprise of seeing each other again on this huge beach with literally thousands of revelers. What were the odds of that? We exchanged details, laughing at the sheer randomness of the situation. The next couple of hours passed in a flash, and before long it was countdown to midnight. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Fireworks and music blasted as the clock struck 12. We admired the view and I looked at Isabel. She was stunning in her neon party attire and glowing face paint. She smiled at me, then kissed me passionately. We partied the night away and Rob got very close with Isabel's German friend. Pete and Phil had wandered off into the chaos and were nowhere to be seen. 3 a.m. came and tiredness set in. I text Pete and Phil telling them that we want to leave. Pete tells me him and Phil had found a couple of Thai girls and would stay with them for the night. Me, Rob, Isabel and her German friend get into the truck, ears ringing from the noise. I'm not a big drinker and felt fine enough to drive back. Isabel sat up front with me while Rob and the German girl made out in the back. Back to the bungalows. Rob and the German in one and me and Isabel in the other, and you can guess the rest. I wake as the sun peeks through the curtains with Isabel still asleep. Happy New Year. Outside we find Rob and the German girl talking as we join them. We spent that night chilling by the sea. I felt like I was living in Alex Garland's The Beach. At some point later on, Peter and Phil came back looking worse for wear, but grinning like Cheshire cats after their night with the 2 Thai girls. That night, we went to a pool party that the girls had invited us to. There, we caught up with the guys who they had travelled with and partied until I went back to Isabel's room nearby so that Pete and Phil could sleep in my bungalow undisturbed while Rob and the German girl stayed in the other bungalow. Me and Isabel talked and enjoyed our time together that night as we would be parting ways in the morning as they went to Phuket while we were going back to Bangkok. In the morning, we made some vague promises to see each other again, even though we both knew it wouldn't happen. Such as it is with the innocence of young romance, Rob picked me up in the truck as he brought the German girl back. As sad as I was to be leaving the party, I felt happy that I still had another week of holiday with Pete ahead. We returned to the pickup truck and went by boat to Chompon on the mainland before catching a bus back to Bangkok. We arrived at night and checked into a cheap hotel near Victory Monument. We're not in the mood for partying, so just get some food before sleeping. The next morning took a crazy minivan ride for 2 hours down to Pattaya. I had an apartment there, but Pete offered to get me a room in the same hotel he was staying at, which I couldn't refuse. The next few days were a blur of chilling by day and typical Pattaya antics by night. Eventually, Pete's last day came before he needed to head back to Bangkok to catch his flight back to the UK. That night, we just stayed in the hotel, sitting on his balcony with a few cans of beer and talked. It was really sad to see Pete leave, but he felt worse. I was lucky enough to be living in Pattaya while he had to head back to dreary old England. Morning came and we said goodbye to Pete as we go back to our normal lives. I get a message a day later from Pete telling me he's in England and he wishes he was back. A few days later, Isabel sends me a selfie in the snowy Alpine mountains of northern Italy. Cindy messaged me asking if Pete will call Veronica as she needs money. It isn't really likely. So there you go, that's quite a nice story. And you know, when I read a story like that, it's one of those kind of stories. These were young people, very young people in their 20s. And I'm kind of guessing now that they're probably married, they've got kids, and they're living sort of mundane, normal lives like we all do. And what this story is probably the best memory of the guy's life. You know, he came to Thailand as a young man, met this beautiful Italian girl called Isabel. You know, they made out, they had a great party on the beach, stayed in the bungalows, and those memories will probably stick with him until he's an old man. Fantastic. Okay, and if you haven't been to Thailand, that should make you want to come. All right, let's go into our fourth story. And remember, there is a real life story at the end that I'm going to tell you that happened to a friend that I met out here the other day, just to warn you guys about scams that are happening on the internet. All right, you probably know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. All right, story number 4. Hi Peter, I'm John, a 42-year-old man from a town called Shirebrook near Mansfield in East Midlands. I'd firstly like to say how much me and my friend Ray like listening to all your stories. My story is a rather long one, as I've been going to Thailand since November 2009, and obviously back then I was only 30. It was a time of the financial crisis, and as I'm a self-employed plasterer, there wasn't a lot of work around due to the housing market slowing down, with the banks not borrowing much money for mortgages. At this time, I was working in Mansfield at the time in a fire door production factory. I'd recently broke up from a long-term relationship in 2007, feeling a little insecure and very bored with this factory job I had. A few of my newfound work friends at the factory were also wanting a little bit more from life other than making fire doors for a living in boring Mansfield. We all regularly chatted about getting a work visa for another country and leaving this dull factory life behind. All 4 of us decided we wanted to go to Australia and work, so we applied for a working holiday visa and we all got accepted. I was very excited about the whole new experience I was going to have. I started doing some research about having a holiday stop on the way. One of the guys had already been to Thailand before, but not for long periods, and had told me a few stories about the kingdom. Our departure date of November the 9th, 2009 had finally arrived. We flew Thai Airways. 3 of us had never flown long haul before, so we made the most of it with the free drinks and the food on board. We met a guy on the aircraft also going to Thailand, but with a lot more experience than us. He told us lots of stories about Thailand, the bars, the girls, and how to treat the Thai people respectfully. To be honest, I did not find out until being in Thailand for several days, but a lot of the guy's advice was fantasy rather than fact. We arrived in Bangkok and made our way to the hotel, which was located near Khao San Road. I don't think anybody will ever forget that first feeling of walking out of the heavily air-conditioned airport in Bangkok and into an almost furnace of heat, humidity and pollution. Still, we had arrived in Bangkok. Like any other newbies, we made some mistakes, firstly being talked into booking an expensive airport limo. Live and learn. After reaching the hotel, we get showered, changed and head off to the famous Khao San Road. The feeling was like no other, the sounds, the smells of the street food. Even though one of the group had never been to Thailand before, as I mentioned earlier in the story, we fell for the old tuk-tuk scam to the ping pong shows. That was mistake number 2. I've heard many nightmare stories about those venues, about people getting ripped off for thousands of baht, but we actually had a great time and never got bothered once while we were out there. Our first 3 days in Bangkok were really good, both the daytime and of course the nights when we went out partying. In the day, we went out visiting the temples and doing all the touristy things you do in a new city. On our last night in Bangkok, we decided to go out for a nice meal in a local restaurant. We sat down for dinner where we were met by a beautiful Thai serving girl who looked no older than 18, but who was actually 27. We continued to enjoy our evening with lots of food and lots of Chang beer. All four of us were flirting with the Thai girl that worked there and asked her to join us for the night when she had finished work. She accepted and we hit Carlson Road for the third and final night in Bangkok. It was a usual crazy night with lots of Chang beer and lots of Thai food. The night finally came to an end and I found myself with a beautiful Thai girl in some random hotel lobby drinking beer while she was eating Thai food. We ended up getting a room in this hotel as I was sharing a room back at my hotel and I wanted some privacy for the upcoming gymnastics. We had a great evening and she never asked me for anything, which I thought was great. If this is Thailand, I can live with it. Not spending too much money was not to last, however. Many thousands of baht have exchanged hands since then. I guess I got lucky, and being much younger than today, I probably looked a bit more appealing to the girls than I do currently. We left for Koh Samui the following afternoon, but before we left, I popped into the restaurant and exchanged contact details with my new girlfriend from last night. We visited Koh Samui, Phuket, PP Island. We joined in all of the full moon and half moon parties. It was great fun back then. I wouldn't dream of doing that stuff now, but being 11 years ago, it was all fun to me. After 4 weeks of what had been the absolute best time of my life, meeting and making friends with lots of people and some who I still keep in contact with today, it was time to fly on to Australia. We landed in Sydney and I was feeling very sad at leaving Thailand. There I was in an amazing city like Sydney, and all I wanted to do was get back on a flight straight back to Bangkok. Nonetheless, I went with the flow of the group and continued to enjoy my time in Australia. We spent 3 weeks in Sydney enjoying Christmas and New Year on Darling Harbour. We then rented a camper van and drove to Melbourne, driving along the coast, stopping off at a number of places to spend the night. We all enjoyed the beautiful southeast coastline of Australia. My funds were getting very low at this point, and as I arrived in Melbourne and after paying for a week's rent in a hostel, my funds had finally run out. I went to an internet cafe across the road as smartphones weren't really around that much back then. I searched online for a job and luckily started work the next morning. The job scene was much better back then. I was enjoying my time in Australia, but I could not get Thailand out of my mind. I just wanted to be back there. The Australian girls are stunning, but I'm not the most handsome man on the planet, so I never really stood a chance of getting together with a beautiful Australian girl. Around this time, most of our group of guys from Nottingham had agreed to split up and go their separate ways. After a few months of installing loft installation in Melbourne and earning a very good salary, I had managed to save a little money and was planning another camping trip to Darwin. It was a huge shock to the system coming from Thailand, where £20 can go a long way if you're careful, compared to Australia where it is very expensive for everything. Me and another guy headed up to Darwin again, stopping off and camping along the way. We had another amazing time experiencing the Australian outback with all its wildlife, totally different to England, and all the time never forgetting about Thailand and constantly talking about Bangkok at every opportunity that I could. Again, I was getting very low on funds, so I started looking for another job. Someone mentioned a couple of pearl boat companies in Darwin, but had said you don't stand much chance of getting a job with them as every backpacker in town is after the same job. Nonetheless, me and one of the other guys tried our luck and headed off to the office of the pearl boat company. We walked in and the guy at the desk asked what we wanted. A job, we replied. It was then that the phone rang and the guy at the desk answered. He continued to have a conversation with a man on the other end of the phone, and just before he hung up, asked if they were going to replace the two backpackers that had recently been sacked for stealing pearls. He put the phone down and said, "This is your lucky day, boys. When can you start?" This job was just what I was looking for. 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and on my 3 weeks off, I was going to fly back to Thailand. This job wasn't just ideal for me to get back to Thailand, it was one of the best experiences of my life. Working again in the Northern Territory on a boat in shark-infested waters, the wildlife was unbelievable. So the first break I sailed back to Darwin and booked the flight to Phuket via Singapore. I had to spend the night in Singapore, which I didn't mind at all, as it's quite a beautiful city with lots of fun things to do. Whilst working on the boat, I made friends with a really cool German guy named Marcel. I introduced him to Thailand for the first time and we returned on every break we had. After a year of being away, I returned to the UK. I started back work in the UK and saved up to go back and travel some more. I was always interested in going back to tour Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. So after a few months saving up, I flew back to Bangkok and had some more trips planned in Southeast Asia. Vietnam and Laos were great fun, but I couldn't wait to get back to Thailand. The Thai girl I told you about earlier in the story, who we had met in the restaurant, had now moved to Phuket and opened her own little travel shop. You know, the type that you see all over Thailand for booking your trips to the islands, bus, boat and train tickets and so on. We had kept in touch all this time on Messenger and she offered me a job working in her travel agent. I was interested in staying in Thailand for a longer period of time and thought this could be a good opportunity to do that. I made my way to Phuket by bus as I was again a little bit low on funds. After finding an apartment and paying a month's rent near the travel shop, I was literally broke. I wasn't really worried this time as I was making a little bit of money at the travel shop, just enough to eat and drink. It wasn't about partying at this point, it was just about staying in Thailand and living the Thai lifestyle. I was probably the poorest Farang in Thailand at this point, but I didn't care. It was just great to be here and wake up every morning in the country I love so much. I was also waiting for a tax return that was being processed from my time working in Australia, so I knew eventually I would receive about £1,500 that would be transferred to my UK bank account. I was living on around 200 to 300 baht per day, but having the best time of my life. I didn't really enjoy working in the travel shop as a Thai girl I was working for didn't really have the same happy-go-lucky attitude she had had when we first met in Bangkok. In fact, she had turned into a real misery and wasn't pleasant to work for at all. After finishing work one day, I decided to have a walk down Bangla Road and see if I could find some kind of other job. Most of the bar owners laughed at me when I asked them for work, but I continued to try. I decided to turn up a soy off Bangla Road called Soy Sea Dragon. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know the street. I walked slowly up the soy just looking for a friendly-faced bar owner to approach when I came to a bar called Coney Bar. The bar was covered with balloons with food laid out as it was one of the bar girls' birthdays. The owner came and sat with me and asked all the usual questions. What is my name and what had I planned for the night? I replied, I'm looking for a job. She looked at me a little confused. A job? But you're a Farang. Why you want job? After explaining my situation to her, she said, you're serious, aren't you? I tried to help you. Wait 1 minute. I carried on drinking my beer, not expecting anything spectacular to develop when the lady returned with an Asian guy. I first thought he was Thai, but after speaking with him, he told me he was a Malaysian and owned 4 go-go bars in Soy Sea Dragon and was looking for an English-speaking manager. I told him I would be interested, so began to follow him inside one of his go-go bars. We walked inside, and as you would expect, around 20 scantily clad girls were dancing on stage. I thought all my Christmases had come at once. He showed me around a little and said, you can start tonight if you like. I worked there for around 3 months all in all, and it was an awesome experience. I was still very new to Thailand at this point, but this job taught me a lot about what goes on with the girls and how they have numerous Farangs sending them cash. I literally witnessed every scenario with these girls in the time I spent there, but I had lots of fun and all the girls made me feel very welcome. I actually still keep in touch with a couple of them to this day. My salary was laughable, if I'm honest, just 9,000 baht a month, but I wasn't there for the money, it was all about the experience. As soon as the tax rebate I spoke of earlier in the story was debited into my account, I finished the job and enjoyed around 3 weeks holiday, and of course I went on to spend time with my favourite girl I had been watching for the last 3 months but had been off limits to me as I worked in the go-go bar. Since 2009 and my first time leaving Europe, I have been all around the world and would say travel is by far my biggest passion. I have plans to go to many more countries and want to experience many more adventures, but Thailand will always be my go-to place. After all the countries I have visited, Thailand is by far my favourite country. No disrespect to any other country, but Thailand is just something else. I also introduced Thailand to my father at 60 years old, and let's just say, after endless amounts of advice before his first trip, he made every rookie mistake in the book but that's another story. Thank you so much, and I will continue to watch your channel every week. So there you go. That's another one like the last story, isn't it? He a young guy. He went to Thailand. He did everything in his power to stay there. Didn't want to leave, and it was years ago. So obviously this is another guy living an everyday, normal, mundane lifestyle. And he probably looks back at this. Great memories, great memories. Okay, so let me finish today's story with a little warning for you, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Okay guys, look, you've got to be very, very careful of internet online scams here. I met a guy playing pool the other night. I like to play pool. When I don't want a heavy night, I'll go out and have a few games of pool. I met a guy, he's about 50 years of age. The guy comes from the UK, South London, I believe it was, he said. And I got very, very friendly with him. And we went on to talk about the girls and relationships. And I told him about my situation with my wife, our separation and everything. And he was telling me that when he come out here, he was actually looking for a nice girl that he could make a girlfriend, rather than, you know, he wasn't interested in bar girls and bed hopping and that sort of thing. So he went online with Thai Friendly, I believe it was. He signed up, he put his age of 50, several photographs, give a brief description of himself, what he was looking for, and just waited to see what happens. You know how it goes. You swipe all these pictures. Few girls he liked, he you know, whatever you click on there, he clicked. And he got several responses back. Now, one girl came back to him, and the picture was very, very beautiful. In her bio, she was 32 years old. She was from Japan. He immediately thought, this is great, you know, because although he's in Thailand, he's not overly keen on Thai girls. He'd rather have another Asian girl. He just likes living in Thailand. So he clicked on this this supposedly Japanese girl, and immediately they started a little bit of communication. Now, the girl at this point said, let's go on to Line, the Line app. It's easier to talk and send photographs and things like that. So I'll try and condense the story down so it doesn't go on too long, but basically she was, he asked, are you using Google Translate or do you speak English? She came back and said, I'm using Translate, but I do speak quite a lot of English, but I'm not a great conversationalist, I can't write it. So that was fine. So he went on to ask, you know, what you're doing in Bangkok, you know, how long have you been there, you know, normal sort of thing. So she came back and she said, what do you do in Bangkok? What do you do for a job? Which he thought was quite normal. And he went back and he said, I work on the internet. And she just seemed a little bit too pushy, you know. This is what the guy's telling me. So, you know, as these conversations go on, she kept kind of emphasizing, yeah, I know you work on the internet, but you could be doing anything on the internet. You know, everybody worked on the internet during COVID. What specifically do you do? So this guy, he's a kind of data analyst. He can work on a PC anywhere. He works for companies, but he's not employed by a company. He's self-employed. He does something to do with database. I don't know exactly, but he did tell me. I just can't explain it here. And he thought, okay, fine. She wants to know, you know, she's Japanese. Obviously, she's Asian. She wants to know my financial stability. Can I take her out for nice meals? Do I have a nice apartment, or am I some kind of bum, some kind of loser who's going to be, you know, sucking on her sort of thing, you know, trying to get money out of her? So he thought, fair enough, it's a legit question. Wrote to her and then said, you know, told him what the job was, and it suddenly dawned on him. He thought, well, hang on a minute, you know, she's. What he actually did, one of the things he did, which made him a little bit suspicious, he thought, well, I'll go onto Google Translate and I'll say from the heart what I really want to say to this girl, but I'll translate it in Japanese. And then when I send it to her, one, it shows that he's made the effort to actually go off and you know, change it, translate it to Japanese. He's made the effort. And two, hopefully she can read in detail how he's feeling, what his aspirations are, that sort of thing. And so he did that. But what was really weird, this is what he's telling me, he said, what was really weird is that we're having this conversation, but anytime he sent a Japanese text to her, she never actually replied to any of it. You know, she did. It was as if he never sent it. You know, so every time he translated into Japanese, sent it to her, there was no response. Basically, she'd come back in English with something completely different. So then he thought, well, hang on, this is a little bit suspicious. Firstly, she's not Thai, she's Japanese, and he'd also said to her, one of the things she'd said in her text comment, she said, "Oh, I'm not interested in your money. I can make your own." So, of course, he's thinking, well, what the hell is she doing then? So he goes back to her and says, well, okay, you've said you don't need my money, you can make your own money. What do you do for a living? She said, oh, I run an accountancy firm in Tokyo, and I'm here to open another one. And he's tried digging a little bit deeper and he couldn't get anywhere. So this supposedly lady comes back on the defensive and say, oh, is this normal? You want to know everything about me, blah, blah, blah. And he fires back and says, well, hang on, is it normal that somebody who's looking for a date asks what your financial position is and keeps pushing on this? So then this other person gets really defensive and says, oh, you know, I've never come across this. This is a little bit rude, blah, blah, blah. So at this time, this guy who I'm playing pool with, he's starting to really think, okay, this is just isn't going right. You know, somebody who's here for a date, they don't talk like this. So he's starting to think, you know, scam city. I won't name any countries or people, but you know who I'm talking about, right? There's a country and a specific country within a larger continent which is very famous for scammers. Okay, so he's starting to think of this place and he's thinking, right, okay, well let's put them to the test. So he said, okay, fair enough, look, we might have crossed wires here, let's get off on a new footing, right? I'd just like to know you're genuine. You know, can you send me a photograph from where you are, or send me a live location? I just want to know, you know, everything's on the up and up, as it were. So straight away, again, very, very defensive. You know, you know, you don't trust me. How can you question me like this? I feel insulted. You know, all this defensive sort of mechanism was put in place. And he basically went back to her and said, well, you know, no offense to you, but I don't know you. I've met you on the internet. And all I'm asking for is a picture of you with a background or a live location. And of course, you know where it went from there. He's basically, we think now with everything going on, we think it was a scammer who'd put this false, you know, this false persona of a lady up there on whatever the dating app was, to entice guys to click on it. Now, what I said to him is, because he basically went back and said, no, I know you're a scammer, get lost sort of thing, and he blocked him. But I think what I would have done, I would have played it out, because I would have liked to have seen what his attempt was to try and get money. It was definitely a scammer. But I would have really liked to have seen what his plan was to get money. I mean, if you've got any idea, if you've heard of this before and you know what the next stage was, whether it would be gift cards or, you know, I need money, it wouldn't be a flight because she said she was in Bangkok. So, you know, what would she want money for? But if you've got any idea, let me know in the comments. It'll be interesting for everybody else to read, right? So just to end, because this is going on to be a bit of quite a long upload this week. What I would say is, if you come out here and you use the dating sites, you know, be absolutely on your guard, because a lot of people use them to scam. You know, there's ladies of the night on there and all sorts. You know, they can be a good vehicle to meet people. I know a lot of guys who have met their long-term girlfriends or wives. You know, they've hooked up together, they've had families, and it's worked out really, really well. But there's always a few on there who are going to spoil it for everybody else. Okay, so just be really, really careful, be mindful of it, and hopefully you'll be okay. Right, okay, let's end now. So as I said at the beginning of the stream, at the beginning of the upload, it's Saturday today. Tomorrow's Christmas Day. You're all going to be eating too much chicken and turkey, including myself. I'm off to Simon's. They have an open house, about 30 people there, so I don't need to be sitting in a hotel room by myself, kind of moping about. All right. Now, obviously, there won't be a live stream tomorrow as it's Christmas Day, but I'm going to try and do one on Boxing Day. I don't want 2 weeks to go by. No promises. Just look out for the notification, the normal thumbnail with the half-dressed lady on there, as I always do. I've mentioned this before. Somebody wrote to me and said, hey, you know, you did a video about a bus trip. Why are you putting a picture of a half-naked lady on your thumbnail? I said, it's simple. YouTube don't allow me to put a fully naked lady on the thumbnail, right? Makes sense. Okay, all jokes aside. Yeah, I'll try and do a live stream on Sunday. The time, date, everything will be advertised. But for today, guys, as always, that's it. Have a brilliant Christmas. Don't eat and drink too much. You'll regret it on Boxing Day. Until then, I'll see you real soon.